Dan, we have a trade. Breaking overnight, my phone was blowing up because as a New Englander who does work for the Blazers, this was right in my wheelhouse. A lot of people are very confused about this trade. Jrue Holiday is being traded from the Boston Celtics to the Portland Trail Blazers for Anfernee Simons and 2 future second-round picks, the 2030 Knicks second rounder and the Blazers' own 2031 second rounder going to Boston into the deal. It took me a while to kind of wrap my head around this one, Dan, to be honest, because it didn't seem like any rumblings of a reunion with Jrue Holiday after the Blazers acquired Jrue Holiday in the Damian Lillard trade and then flipped him again to Boston and then for Malcolm Brogdon, and then they flipped Malcolm Brogdon and a couple firsts over for Denny Avdia. So this is full circle in many ways for the Blazers to reacquire Uncle Jrue. And I think that's the way I'm thinking about it from the Blazers side is Uncle Jrue. Is like Jrue Holiday is this amazing, beloved teammate for Scoot Henderson and Shaedon Sharpe. That backcourt was really struggling to defend at a high level in the second half of the last season when Chauncey Billups made the switch January 19th to move Shaedon Sharpe out of the starting lineup. Some of that was because he needed better defense in the backcourt. It's one thing to have one guy who's not a plus defender in the backcourt in Anfernee Simons, but it's tough to have 2 of those. And so now they get Jrue Holiday, who's one of the best, if not the best perimeter defender over the last few years. And he is coming in at 35 years old. He just celebrated his 35th birthday. But like, we've seen this before with young teams that are trying to make it with a young team that you get a guy who's a floor general like Jrue Holiday. We look at Fred VanVleet with the Houston Rockets, and you look at Pat Bev with the Minnesota Timberwolves a few years back. And even if you want to go back even further in 2020 with Chris Paul and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander with OKC, there is reason to believe that there are much better things coming forward for Portland, not just on-court stuff, but also veteran leadership in Jrue Holiday.
Yeah. So to me, I think the thing that jumped off the page right away was like, wait a second, the Blazers gave up 2 second-round picks and the younger guy to get Jrue Holiday, who has like $104 million still coming to him over the next few years. So I think like that's the part that I think a lot of people are kind of stuck on. Like, why? Like, the Blazers were 10 games under 500 last year. They were not even like in the play-in mix. Why would they make that kind of move? And I think that the way to think about it is like, the Blazers are at a point where they haven't been good in 5 years, right? Like they have not been so they haven't sniffed 500 since 2021, haven't won a playoff series in I think 6 or 7 years at this point. And they're coming to decision points on some of their younger guys, right? Like you mentioned Shaedon Sharpe, I believe extension eligible this summer, or if not this summer, the next. Scoot Henderson, same, like extension eligible next summer. And those guys are both younger than Anfernee Simons, and they are still under team control for longer with decisions coming. Anfernee Simons entering the last season of his extension this year. And what we know is like, all right, he's not, there's a lot of really good things about Anfernee Simons. And I want to get back to that in terms of him in Boston in a second, but like, he's not quite a point guard, like a lead on ball creator, right? For your full-time offense to be a good offense. He has been, by a variety of metrics, including estimated plus minus, so Taylor Snar's metric at dunks and threes, one of the worst defenders in the league several years, like a consistent net negative there for a team that is now like looking to build through its defense. This felt like an opportunity to say like, we create some runway for 2 guys we need more information about to make decisions like next summer or the next year to see what they can be. And we move one of our more damaging players off to the side to see if what we were last season, where we were like a top 5 defense for the last half of the season, if that can be real enough to be competitive and like take a shot at being good. Maybe like this is I'm getting old, but I'm like, shouts out to trying to take a shot at being good. Like, yeah, like, I understand the general idea of like, this does not necessarily get the Blazers to a championship, right? But like, if you haven't been good in a while, and you just extended your coach, you just extended your lead executive in Joe Cronin. You are a franchise that is for sale, and there's but there's something maybe to be excited about. Like, try to lean into that and see how good you can get. I think there's something to be said for that, and I think Jrue Holiday as that mentor figure, other examples like Mike Conley in Minnesota too, right? Like, or Chris Paul in San Antonio, like that obviously has not turned into a playoff team yet, but like developing the growth for those young guys, showing them how to be that floor general, be the leader on the floor, get you organized, and also what it takes to defend at a high level night after night at the backcourt positions. Like, you you remove the weakest link, you provide a developmental roadmap for some of these young guys. Like, I don't hate it.
I'll tell you one thing, Dan. No one's going to want to go full court against Toumani Camara and Jrue Holiday. Like, they are going to be so hard to dribble up the floor. Like, the Blazers were already just one of the best in 24-second violations forced and 8-second violations forced last year. They were leading the league oftentimes with picking up full court with Toumani Camara and Scoot Henderson. And now you got Jrue Holiday, one of the best at doing this and hounding ball handlers. It's going to be hell going against the Blazers defense this upcoming season, right? And this is kind of the prototype.
What were we talking about all throughout the playoffs and the finals, right? Like the idea of an advancing style of play that the Indiana Pacers were showing you, that with Lou Dort picking up full court, that the Thunder were showing you. Like, I'm not saying that the Blazers are going to vault right into that, but like, this is a move you make to say, like, our identity is going to be stress you out 48 minutes, 94 feet, right?
Yes.
And like,
yes,
with Donovan Clingan, heading into year 2 as a rim protector behind it, with Denny Avdia, Jeremy Grant, like big wings, big forwards who can switch and defend across multiple positions. Matisse Thybulle, who has injuries and has difficulty staying on the court, but like is a really can be an impactful perimeter defender, switchable across positions, picking up full court. Like, you're seeing a style develop here, and I think there's worse ways to build out your roster in 2025.
Yeah, and I will say this. It's going to be in 27-28, Jrue Holiday has a player option for $37 million when he's going to be 37 years old. I expect him to pick that up, but also that will be a trade chip. Like, if the Blazers decide in a couple years they want to swing big for a player, you're going to need a contract that will fit that slot in order to match salaries. So there is value in taking a guy who's a great locker room guy, maybe the best locker room guy in the NBA,
universally
Jrue Holiday,
beloved.
But, like, universally. If you get that guy and to basically tutor Scoot Henderson, who's still super young, came into the NBA as a teenager, and same thing with Shaedon Sharpe. Like, Shaedon Sharpe is super young as well. To have Jrue Holiday be basically your mentor, and then, in a couple years at 37 years old, might not be the same player that he is right now, but he's still a good player. And I think he fits exactly what Chauncey Billups loves to do, is play extremely hard defense, 94 feet, exactly what the Indiana Pacers and the Oklahoma City we just saw do in the NBA Finals. The Blazers were doing that. The Blazers were picking up full court with Toumani Camara, and now you get Jrue Holiday. They were a top 5 defense in the second half of the year. And one thing that I always remember about Joe Cronin a year ago was talking about this past season, looking ahead for this past season. He wanted to get data. He wanted to see what Anfernee Simons, Scoot Henderson, Shaedon Sharpe, what they were together, because there just were so many injuries the year before. They just didn't know what they had in that young backcourt. What they had last season with Shaedon Sharpe and Anfernee Simons, their backcourt of the future, so to speak, was 21st percentile on defense when they were on the floor, giving up 119 points every 100 possessions, according to cleaningtheglass.com. But more interesting to me, their offense was 17th percentile as well. So if you're going to take away defensively, and if you're going to sacrifice your defense, you better make it up on the other end of the floor. And it just didn't click with Anfernee Simons and Shaedon Sharpe as much as you would have hoped for. And so I think that was probably a little bit of a motivator too in this deal, is like, look, if we're not getting that elite offense with Anfernee Simons and that synergy with Shaedon Sharpe, maybe we try to get Jrue Holiday to kind of double down on the defensive end, where it's just really hard in today's NBA. And your weak link theory from Owen Phillips at F5, it's going to be really tough to have two of those guys on the floor at the same time in Shaedon Sharpe and Anfernee Simons. So the more that I thought about it, this made a lot of sense to me if you're Portland, and that's probably me being biased because I'm on the broadcast for them.
Total shill.
But I mean, 29-year-old Fred VanVleet joining the Houston Rockets. They went from a 22-win team to a 41-win team to the number 2 seed in the Western Conference. Pat Bev joined a 23-win team for the Minnesota Timberwolves. And of course, Mike Conley again later developed them into a Western Conference powerhouse alongside Anthony Edwards. The Blazers don't have an Anthony Edwards right now. They don't have an Amen Thompson kind of Alpi Şengün kind of core yet. But Deni Avdija, I think, has the upside of being an all-star next season. He was playing at an all-star level in the second half of next year. And now with the leadership and mentorship of Jrue Holiday, and you get Rob Williams III in there as well, I just think that locker room is vastly improved. What are your thoughts on the Boston side of things? Because right now, Anfernee Simons is a $28 million expiring contract for the Boston Celtics. They shaved about $5 million off of the cap, but that translates to about $40 million in luxury tax payments. They're still not below the second apron, which kind of unlocks a future first round pick. They're not below that quite yet. But Dan, the player that Anfernee Simons brings to that system, I think makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, the idea of give me a guy who is a super accurate, quick trigger, high volume 3-point shooter in Joe Mazzulla ball, like that's a hand in glove fit, right? Especially you figure like the Celtics, we saw what that offense can look like without Jason Tatum, and it can be touch and go, right? Like he has been such a consistent engine of everything they do offensively year in and year out. They are not going to have him next year. And it remains to be seen what additional moves are going to be made there. But I think it's reasonable to presume you're probably going to try to keep Jaylen Brown and Derek White, unless you get bowled over with an offer there. So if you're going to kind of have a timeshare with those two guys handling the ball more, you don't necessarily need Anfernee Simons to be a primary ball handler, shot creator, running all the pick and rolls, right? You can have him be an off-ball player. You can have him be a floor spacer or running off pin downs and secondary actions, coming off dribble handoffs, all that kind of stuff. And the way he can shoot off the catcher, off the bounce, feels like a really snug fit for what they're going to need as somebody to like soak up usage, soak up shot opportunities, and just like with the like neon green light that you imagine Joe Mazzulla is going to be, put in for him in Boston. Like that feels pretty, it feels like a really nice fit there. And then like, as we mentioned, sort of this is the positive spin of the Blazers maybe looking at it and saying, if we don't know that we feel confident in what Anfernee Simons is going to be for us moving forward, it's better for us to make a move now and move off him than like risk losing him for nothing in free agency. The Celtics basically get to look at it and say, here's a year of data of what he looks like in our system. Do we think that this translates to whatever the version of our team is when we have Jason Tatum back? Do we think he's maybe like a high-end third or fourth option on that team? Or do we think that maybe the defensive liabilities of some of the concerns that we've got there make him somebody that we don't want to keep around long-term? Well, you got a dice roll. You got an opportunity to figure it out over the course of the next year. You have his bird rights to be able to either extend him or, offer him more than anybody else in free agency next summer. Or you can walk away and say like that coming off our books helps us as we try to continue lowering our overall, luxury tax liability and getting, dealing with the aprons moving forward for whatever the next competitive iteration of this team is going to be. I think that like in the context of the Celtics as they exist right now, this feels like the first step in the larger project of chop down that bill, get under the luxury tax. I think we're still continuing to keep an eye on Kristaps Porzingis. We're still continuing to keep an eye on Sam Hauser. The Celtics are going to continue to be open for business. And then if they do hang on to Anfernee Simons heading into the season, if they don't reroute him in some other kind of deal, I think it'll be interesting to see like how competitive Boston is next season. Because like they are part of that chaos in the top of the East. They could also be a benefactor, or they could also benefit them if the other teams are still fallen by the wayside, and they still have the core of a continually competitive group, and Simons can elevate that offense a little bit. Like, who knows what their postseason possibilities look like next season? So, like, I think it's an interesting variable to introduce into their structure there in Boston. But I think that it's like cost savings and apron management and roster management, like flexibility first, and then like basketball wise could be an interesting move for Boston too.
He's a great shooter, man.
He's
great off the bounce and deep threes. He learned under the best in Damian Lillard and the logo Lillard. He's one of the guys that over the last couple of years, as I've been doing those games, he gets doubled so much, and so much of the attack in the pick and roll, they would just swarm him because the defenses were like, we're going to make other guys on the team beat you. And that's not going to be the case when you got Jaylen Brown and Derek White on the other side. And who knows what they're going to do with Kristaps Porzingis, Al Horford, but they just have a lot more weapons to kind of proof that, like double proof and blitz proof Anfernee Simons in ways that was a little bit more challenging for the Blazers. So like, he's a great shooter. I think the Celtics are just going to give him, like you said, the greenest of green lights. Like it wouldn't surprise me if he took like a Anthony Edwards volume of 3-pointers next season, because what do you have to lose? The guy can shoot off the bounce. He's got a beautiful 3-point shot, and Missoula ball offense. He's going to get 12, 13 threes a game. I'm pretty sure of that. So it's a flyer for them, is like, hey, we got him on an expiring deal, like you said, bird rights. And if it doesn't work out, you can probably flip him at the deadline to a team like Orlando. He's from Orlando. And maybe if Orlando's like, yeah, we still need more offense, I think he is going to provide value. If it's not going to be the Celtics, he can also be moved at the deadline for the Celtics too. So there's optionality on that as well. I think, to me, this is also just big picture, Dan, really important to hit. The Denver Nuggets won the title, and then they were like, yeah, KCP, we're just going to let you go to Orlando. The Boston Celtics have that Jason Tatum injury, and then they're like, yeah, we're going to shed salary here in Jrue Holiday and perhaps Kristaps Porzingis. The staying power of these champions is, the shelf life is not very long at all. And I don't want to totally ascribe this to the CBA. I think a lot of this has to do with the injuries that happened to Jason Tatum, but it does feel like OKC going forward, this is another thing where they can just be like, yeah, I mean, we're going to have a really good shot at a dynasty here, because the Boston Celtics last year were perhaps our biggest competition in starting what seemed to be championship contention over the next 5 years. And now Boston is kind of not waving the white flag, but I think this is a gap year move in trading for Anfernee Simons and saying, we're taking a flyer on this guy. He's coming into his prime. He's one of the elite 3-point shooters off the bounce in the NBA. And in our system, he's going to excel. And we'll see what we get in terms of the tax and the second apron. It's going to be a little bit tricky to try to extend him long-term, but man, people weren't thinking big things about Derek White in Boston until they got him into that system. And now he's one of the best two-way guys in the league. Not saying Anfernee Simons is going to be a two-way guy,
sure,
but just put him in Missoula's system and maximize that talent. This could end up really, really nice for the Boston Celtics. But yeah, it's going to be tough to see that the Celtics have already dismantled that championship core a little bit sooner than people expected. But with Jason Tatum, unfortunately, it's a harsh reality in today's NBA. So yeah, a very surprising trade. I will say that, Dan. And we expect to have a lot more coming in the next 48 hours as we lead up into the NBA draft.
Goes and goes and goes.
Yeah, it goes,
never
man.
stops.
This is the NBA. It's going to keep going. By the time this ends, like, our producers have not told us that there's a blockbuster trade, but I feel like as soon as we hang up here in a couple moments, it's going to happen, right?
Don't say
it's
that.
It's going to happen, Dan.
Oh, no, I got to go to the grocery store. We can't do any emergency shows. We got to all right, wrap us up, Tom. Get us out of here.
Yeah, so that's the big number. Jrue Holiday for Anfernee Simons, our 4 contenders for next year, an early look ahead at the 26th NBA championship. Congrats to the Oklahoma City Thunder, the OKC Dobermans. Sorry to see the Indiana Pacers. That's right, I said Pacers. What an amazing season from them. Yes, sirs. It is heartbreaking to see the Tyrese Haliburton injury. And one note on that, I forgot to mention this earlier. I looked this up after the game. We had talked about the Indiana Pacers and how much they had passed the ball to win these games and how much more they were passing than OKC. Without Tyrese Haliburton for the majority of that game, the Thunder actually had more passes in Game 7 than the Indiana Pacers. They had 269 for the Pacers, and the Thunder had 272. 3 passes more than the Pacers. Just to give you an idea of the impact of that injury, just completely changed the way that they play basketball in that game. So, Dan, this was an amazing year. I love doing the big number with you this year. We had a lot of fun doing it. Some improv, some scat, some big pimpin' Jay-Z lyrics that was just A+ work by you. This was a really fun year. So thanks so much for doing this, Dan. And also to our team behind the scenes, Stone, Emmy, Mike, the entire squad behind the scenes. Thanks so much for making this podcast and this show a reality. Please watch The Big Number on YouTube, subscribe on all of the platforms, rate us 5 stars, go tell your friends. We'll be back next week with another episode of The Big Number. Until then,